What if I told you that America's iron grip on the global fighter jet market is about to be shattered, not by Russia, not by China, but by a British engine manufacturer and a country most Americans still think of as polite and harmless? Folks, what is happening right now between Rolls-Royce, Sweden, and Canada is nothing short of a seismic shift in global defense politics. And if you care about American jobs, American influence, and America's position as the undisputed leader in military aviation, you need to pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because this story is developing fast. The mainstream media is barely covering it, and the consequences for the United States could be enormous. Before we get into all of it, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and smash the bell icon right now, because stories like this one are exactly why this channel exists. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you are going to understand something about the future of American power that most people in Washington still do not want to talk about. All right, let us start with the basics so everyone is on the same page. For decades, the United States has dominated the global fighter jet market, and it has not been by accident. The F-35 Lightning II, built by Lockheed Martin, is the crown jewel of American military aviation. It is a fifth-generation stealth fighter with sensor fusion, advanced avionics, and capabilities that no other production aircraft on the planet can match right now. Countries around the world line up to buy it, and when they do, they are not just buying an airplane, they are buying into an entire ecosystem that is controlled, maintained, updated, and ultimately governed by the United States of America. Every software patch goes through the Pentagon. Every spare part flows through American supply chains. Every upgrade requires American approval. And that is not a bug in the system, that is a feature, because it gives Washington an extraordinary amount of leverage over its allies. If you fly F-35s, you need America, period. And for a long time, everyone was fine with that arrangement, or at least they pretended to be. But here is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Canada, America's closest ally, its neighbor to the north, a country that shares the longest undefended border in the world with the United States, a country that has been a loyal partner in NATO, in NORAD, in every major Western military operation for generations. Canada is now openly reconsidering whether it wants to keep buying F-35s. And the reason is not just about the airplane. It is about trust. It is about sovereignty, and it is about a growing feeling in Ottawa that relying entirely on Washington for your national defense might not be the smartest play anymore, especially in the current political climate. Now, to understand why this is happening, you have to go back to 2022, when Canada officially selected the F-35 as the replacement for its aging fleet of CF-18 Hornets. The plan was to buy 88 F-35A jets at a total cost of roughly $14 billion. It was a huge deal, a massive commitment, and it was supposed to be settled. Done. Case closed. But then something changed. Trade tensions between the United States and Canada escalated dramatically. Tariffs were slapped on Canadian goods. There was open talk from Washington about Canada being treated not as an ally, but as an economic competitor, or worse. And suddenly, a lot of people in Ottawa started asking a very uncomfortable question. If the United States is willing to treat us like this on trade, what happens when they have a veto over our entire Air Force? That question opened the door for Sweden's Saab, the company that makes the Gripen fighter jet. Now, the Gripen is not an F-35. Let me be very clear about that. It is a fourth generation, maybe 4.5 generation, multi-role fighter. It does not have stealth. It does not have the same level of sensor fusion. On paper, in a head-to-head dogfight or a high-end contested environment, the F-35 wins every time. But the Gripen has something the F-35 does not, and that something is independence. The Gripen was designed by Sweden, a country with a long tradition of strategic neutrality, and it was built from the ground up to be operated independently by smaller nations. It can take off and land on highways, on frozen lakes, on short improvised runways in the middle of nowhere. It can be refueled and rearmed in about 15 minutes by a small crew. Its maintenance requirements are a fraction of what the F-35 demands. And here is the kicker. Its operating costs are estimated at around $8,000 per flight hour, compared to the F-35, which runs anywhere from $35,000 to nearly $50,000 per flight hour. That is not a small difference. That is a chasm. But there has always been one massive problem with the Gripen, and this is where the Rolls-Royce breakthrough comes in and changes everything. The Gripen E, the latest and most advanced version, currently uses a General Electric F414G engine. That is an American engine made by an American company, and it falls under ITAR, which stands for International Traffic in Arms Regulations. What that means in plain English is that the United States government has veto power over who can buy and operate the Gripen because of that American engine sitting inside it. So even if Canada wanted to buy the Gripen to escape American control, they could not actually escape American control because America still controlled the heart of the airplane. It was a catch-22. And for years, it seemed like there was no way around it. And then Rolls-Royce stepped in. The British engine manufacturer has proposed replacing the American GE F414G with a new engine designated the EJ230, which is based on the Rolls-Royce EJ200 that has been powering the Eurofighter Typhoon for over a decade. This is not some theoretical concept on a whiteboard. The EJ200 is a proven, reliable, combat-tested engine. It has been in service with multiple NATO air forces for years. And the development work to adapt it for the Gripen is not starting from scratch either. Back in 2013, a Gripen B was actually used as a technology demonstrator for the Eurofighter engine upgrade. So the engineering foundation already exists. And here is the part that should make every American defense industry executive sit up straight in their chair. Rolls-Royce has operations in Montreal, Canada. The engine could potentially be manufactured or assembled right there on Canadian soil. Think about what that means. If this engine swap happens, the Gripen goes from being partially controlled by the United States to being completely independent of the United States. No more ITAR restrictions, no more American veto over exports, no more Pentagon approval needed for upgrades or maintenance. The entire supply chain shifts from North America under American oversight to a European-Canadian partnership that Washington has zero leverage over. And Canada is not just casually interested in this. In March 2025, the Liberal government under Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a formal review of the F-35 purchase, citing heightened trade and diplomatic tensions with the United States. After winning re-election, Carney went to the World Economic Forum in Davos in January 2026 and gave a speech that sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, arguing that allies need to diversify to hedge against uncertainty. That is diplomatic language, but everyone in the room knew exactly what he meant. We cannot put all our eggs in the American basket anymore. Then in January 2026, the National Post reported, citing unnamed sources, that Ottawa was unlikely to follow through on the full 88-jet F-35 plan and was instead considering buying fewer F-35s while adding the Gripen E as a second type in a mixed fleet. Canadian Defence Minister David McGuinty confirmed that no final decision had been made, but the fact that this was even being discussed publicly was extraordinary, and Saab smelled blood in the water. In December 2025, the company announced that localizing production of both the Gripen fighter and the GlobalEye airborne surveillance aircraft in Canada could support up to 12,600 jobs, Bombardier, one of Canada's biggest aerospace companies, was positioned as a key partner. Saab was not just offering an airplane, they were offering Canada an entire aerospace industry, the chance to build fighter jets on Canadian soil with Canadian workers using Canadian materials. And for a country that still mourns the cancellation of the Avro Aero back in 1959, when America pressured Canada into killing its own advanced fighter program, that offer hits on a very deep emotional level. Now, let me bring this back to the American perspective, because that is what matters to you and me. The United States Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, has publicly warned that a Canadian pullback from the F-35 would force changes to continental air defense arrangements under NORAD. That is not a subtle statement. That is Washington saying, if you walk away from our jet, there will be consequences for how we defend this continent together. And he is not wrong about the operational challenges. A mixed fleet of F-35s and Gripens would create real. Lockheed Martin, they are funding American factories, American engineers, American workers in communities from Texas to Connecticut to California. If major allies start peeling away from the F-35 program, the economic ripple effects inside the United States would be significant, and that is before you even get into the strategic implications. Now, I want to be fair here. There are very real arguments for why the Gripen is not a true replacement for the F-35. Stealth matters. In a high-end conflict against a near-peer adversary like China or Russia, the ability to penetrate enemy air defenses undetected is not a luxury, it is a necessity. The Gripen, no matter what engine you put in it, does not have that capability. Sensor fusion, the F-35's ability to take data from dozens of different sources and present it to the pilot as a single unified picture of the battle space, that is revolutionary technology that the Gripen simply does not have. And interoperability with American systems, particularly within NORAD, where Canada and the United States share the responsibility of defending North American airspace, is genuinely important. You cannot just hand-wave that away. So the honest assessment is that both sides have legitimate points, and the right answer for Canada might actually be the messy middle ground of a mixed fleet, with a small number of F-35s for the high-end missions and Gripens for the routine patrols, the NATO deployments, and the Arctic sovereignty missions. University of Ottawa professor Peter Jones made exactly this argument in a Globe and Mail piece, noting that the F-35 could handle missions linked to the United States, while Gripens handle NATO deployments and routine patrols, saving enormous amounts of money on operating costs over the life of the fleet. But here is what I think the real story is, and I want you to think about this deeply. The fact that we are even having this conversation, the fact that America's closest ally is seriously considering alternatives to buying American, the fact that a British engine manufacturer sees a market opportunity in helping countries escape American defense dependency, that tells you something profound about where the United States stands in the world right now. This is not just about jets. This is about trust. This is about whether the nations that have stood beside America for decades still believe that America will stand beside them. And right now, that trust is fraying in ways that have real, measurable, multi-billion-dollar consequences. I want to give you a quick update on the timeline of everything that has happened so far, because the pace of developments has been remarkable. In 2022, Canada selected the F-35 and announced plans for 88 jets. In 2023, the deal for the first 16 jets was finalized. Then in March 2025, the new Liberal government under Mark Carney announced a formal review of the entire purchase. In November 2025, Saab CEO Mikael Johansson told Reuters that Canada was being considered as a location for Gripen assembly, partly to meet Ukraine's interest in purchasing over 100 Gripen fighters. In December 2025, Saab announced the 12,600 jobs package for Canada. In January 2026, Carney gave his Davos speech about diversification. Also in January 2026, the National Post reported that Canada was leaning toward a mixed fleet. In February 2026, reports emerged that Canada was already making payments for long lead components for 14 additional F-35s, trying to keep its options open while the review continues. And all the while, the Rolls-Royce engine discussion has been accelerating in defense forums, industry publications, and behind closed doors in Ottawa, London, and Stockholm. There was a UK-Sweden memorandum of understanding signed back in 2019 between Rolls-Royce and Saab to partner on future combat air technology. So the institutional framework for this engine swap already exists. Now, I know some of you are thinking, this is just Canada. They are a small market. Who cares? But I need you to understand why this matters way beyond Canada. If Saab successfully re-engines the Gripen with Rolls-Royce power and establishes a production line in Canada, that production line does not just serve Canada. It serves Ukraine, which has expressed interest in over 100 Gripens. It serves Colombia, which just signed a contract for 17 Gripen EF aircraft. It serves any future customer who wants a modern fighter without American strings. You are looking at a potential production run of 200 or more airframes, and at that scale, the economics start to make a lot of sense, even with the development costs of the engine swap. And every single one of those jets is a jet that is not an F-35, not American, and not subject to American influence. The Pentagon knows this. The defense industry knows this. And quietly, behind the scenes, the lobbying effort to keep Canada in the F-35 program is intense. Ambassador Hoekstra's public warnings are just the tip of the iceberg. There are conversations happening at every level of the U.S.-Canada relationship right now about what it would mean if Ottawa walks away from even part of this deal. But the fundamental problem Washington faces is that the very behavior that is driving Canada toward the Gripen, the tariffs, the hostile rhetoric, the treating of allies as adversaries, that behavior is not stopping. And as long as it continues, the argument for defense independence only gets stronger. Let me bring this to a personal level for a moment. I have spent years covering defense and geopolitics on this channel. And I have to tell you, this story hits differently than most, because it is not about some distant conflict or some abstract policy debate. This is about the relationship between the United States and its closest friend in the world. This is about whether American leadership means partnership or control. And right now, a lot of countries are looking at what is happening with Canada and drawing their own